paper 2 GCSE walkthrough of the Pearson Edexcel Lift 2.0 GCSE English language paper. So as you can see, this paper is out of 80, the same as paper 1. Please use black ink only. Today we're just going to be looking at section A, which is the reading section of questions 1 to 6. The biggest thing to take away from this paper is that it's a comparison paper. So questions 5 and 6, you're going to have to look at both texts at once and try and work out the similarities and differences depending on what they ask for. So question 1, I always tell my students to read the question before you read the text. Do take note of the writing in bold. It says that you should spend 1 hour and 10 minutes in the reading section, which would give you 45 minutes for the writing section. Read text 1 in the source booklet and answer questions 1 and 2, and write your answers in the space provided. So from lines 12 to 18, identify one thing Richard thought he might see at the beach. So I'm going to read now from lines 1 to 18. I'm going to start with the context though. So in this edited extract from a novel, Richard and his 2 traveling companions, Etienne and Francois, are searching for a secret beach. On their journey, they now find themselves at the top of a waterfall with no obvious way down. The falls dropped into a pool from which a quick flowing stream ran into the trees. The highest trees were more than equal to our height. If they'd been a little closer, we could have used them to get down, and getting down was the big problem. The drop was too sheer and too far to consider climbing. What do you think? I said, crawling back from the cliff edge towards Etienne and Francois. Francois stood up and stared over the lagoon towards the seaward rock face. Perhaps we should walk around there, she suggested. It may be easier to climb. It's higher than here. You can see where the land rises. We could jump into the sea. It's not too high to jump. We'd never clear the rocks. She looked irritated and tired. Okay, Richard, but there must be a way down, no? If people go to this beach, there must be a way. If people go to this beach, I echoed. We hadn't seen any sign that people were down there. I'd been carrying an idea that when we reached the beach, we'd see groups of friendly travellers with sun-kissed faces, hanging out, coral diving, playing frisbee, all that stuff. As it was, from what we could see, the beach looked beautiful, but completely deserted. So that's down to line 18. So straight away, try and underline the most important parts of the question. We know that we are doing lines 12 to 18, so don't go outside of those line parameters. And one thing Richard thought he might see at the beach, I've helpfully copied lines 12 to 18 below. She looked irritated and tired. And straight away, you can see we hadn't seen any sign that people were down there. I've been carrying an idea that when we reached the beach, we'd see groups of friendly travellers with sun-kissed faces hanging out, coral diving. So I'm going to put groups of travellers hanging So this is a simple answer here. I have just quoted from the text, but you're welcome to put it in your own words. I've really kind of made sure that I've got every bit of information in there just so I don't lose that 1 mark. This question is assessing your ability to find explicit information. So it's not looking for you to infer or anything like that. But as you can see with the mark scheme, groups of friendly travellers with sun-kissed faces, tourists. Well, we didn't get that one. Groups of travellers, so I'd probably get that one there. But I've also put coral diving, playing frisbee. Okay, so I'm definitely going to get that 1 mark there. So question 1, generally speaking, it's a nice and easy question. Question 2. Read this extract. I stood up cautiously. Now, a good thing here is to read the rest of the text just so that we've got a full understanding of what the text is about. Maybe we can jump from this waterfall, said Etienne. It's not so high as the cliff in the sea. I thought for a moment. Possibly, I replied and rubbed my eyes. The adrenaline that had kept me going and faded now was exhausted. So exhausted I couldn't even feel relief at having found the beach. If, I reasoned, the waterfall had been pounding down into the pool below for 1,000 years, then it was likely that a basin had been eroded into the rock. A basin deep enough to accommodate my leaping into it. But if the island had been created relatively recently, maybe the result of volcanic activity 200 years ago, then there might not have been time for a deep enough pool to have formed. The pebbles in the water were smooth. The trees were tall and old. Okay, I whispered. I stood up cautiously, 1 foot an inch from the cliff, the other set back at a stabilizing angle. Are you jumping? Called Etienne nervously. Just taking a better look. An overwhelming sensation washed over me, almost boredom, a strange listlessness. I was suddenly sick of how difficult this journey had become, and there was too much effort, too many shocks and dilemmas to dissect. And this sickness had an effect. For a vital few seconds, it liberated me from a fear of consequences. So jump, I heard my voice say. So in looking at question 2, we're just going to look at this specific part of the text that they give us. I think it's quite kind that they give us the exact bit. So read the question again. How does the writer use language to show how Richard and Etienne feel about their situation? So how do Richard and Etienne feel? Straight away, I'm going to start off with their names, Richard and Etienne. Now, I'm coming up with a point here, so I'm trying to use my own words. Feel anxious about their journey to the beach. Now, where in the text does it suggest they are feeling anxious? How about, are you jumping? You jumping called Etienne? Just taking a better look. So now, quite clearly, I've kind of conveyed that feeling of anxiety. She's asking questions, she's asking them nervously. He's kind of suggesting that he's just taking a better look. So there's an element of hesitancy here. Now, this is a language question, right? As soon as you see that word language in your head, you want to flip to your language features, damp forest or da forest, whatever you use. Here we have the word nervously. Straight away, I'm thinking adverb. We've also got dialogue, which you could use here. And we've also got short sentence, or a number of short sentences, really. Well, 2 short sentences. So I'm going to try and get in both because I want to kind of illustrate to the examiner that I can use a wide range of subject terminology here, as demonstrated there. So the use of the adverb. Remember, if a word ends in ly, it's usually an adverb. Use of the adverb nervously creates tension Now, why does it create tension? It's because it kind of, by suggesting a sense of worry. Furthermore, now the analysis is where you're going to kind of pick up marks here and get yourself into that top band. So the more analysis you do, the better. The short sentences imply Richard is considering carefully his next move. Okay, and you want to link it back to the reader. So how does this make us feel? This makes the reader feel tense because always try and explain why we have that feeling. We are unsure of how they will get down the waterfall. Okay, apologies for the handwriting. Now, obviously, this is a 6-mark question. Okay, so you're going to need more than one paragraph. I would try and, I mean, we've got a petal answer here. We've got a clear point, evidence, technique, and then the analysis. I'll point those out for you. So this is my point. And the evidence. Now I've got 2 techniques, which is always going to be better than one: adjective and short sentences. And I've kind of interspersed here that analysis. So as soon as you use words like imply or create, you get that idea that there is some analysis going on and I'm trying to tell the reader. Now, never forget, this makes the reader feel. Okay, we always want to try and convey to the examiner the effect on the reader. And by using a sentence like that, this makes the reader feel tense. Try and explain why. But it gives the examiner an idea that we're assessing the impact of the language. Now, I'm just going to show you the mark scheme for this one. So comment on the text, explains the text, analysis of the text. So that's really where we're trying to get to, that analysis of the text and how language is used. Obviously, we've only got one quote here, so we're not going to be kind of hitting this level, discriminating. But as you can see, it's generally appropriate. So from just one paragraph, you're able to get into level 2, but really I'd be aiming for 2 petal paragraphs here. And a range of relevant subject terminology. I'd say a range is 3. So again, if we'd done another paragraph, we'd definitely be hitting 3 pieces of terminology because we've got short sentences and also an adverb. Try and use different terminologies for each point, and also try and always make different points. Okay, so that's question 2. Now, question 3 is about text 2. So what's quite unusual in this paper is that you're only doing 2 questions on text 1, 2 questions on text 2, and then questions 5 and 6 are about both texts. Read this extract. The atmosphere was electric. It was a cacophony of noise from the PA system, that's the public announcement system, as well as cheers, shouts, and applause from the crowd. The sound ricocheted around the domed, undulating ceilings of the London Aquatic Centre. It was almost deafening, undulating as that goes up and down. I inhaled slowly and steadily. The air was thick with the sticky warmth of chlorine and the charged crowd. I needed to focus hard. My heart pounded to the tips of my fingers. So straight away, identify one thing that suggests this is an exciting moment. You could have atmosphere was electric. Okay, again, quote marks works. You can put it in your own words if you like. You could also have something like the crowd made lots of noise. So again, don't spend too much time on this question. I'd really be trying to hit that kind of 1 minute, 2 minute mark. So just be careful. If you can always come back to it once you've read the whole text. But yeah, I'd say get this one done. As you can see here, we definitely pick up the marks. Atmosphere was electric. The crowd was making a lot of noise. The air in the diving centre is charged. The character is trying to focus. Tom describes his heartbeat. So relatively straightforward. Now I'm going to read through the whole text just so we have an idea of what it's about, basically. In this edited extract from his autobiography, Tom Daley, a British Olympic diver, describes the build-up to his first dive at the London Olympics. As I walked to the edge of the 10-metre board, I glanced down. The distinctive pattern of the interlocking rings and the words London 2012 shone through the bright blue of the water. Olympic banners were plastered across every available wall, along with flags of the participating countries, and my own face grinned back at me on various enormous screens sitting high above the stands. The atmosphere was electric. It was a cacophony of noise from the PA system, as well as cheers, shouts, and applause from the crowd. The sound ricocheted around the domed, undulating ceilings of the London Aquatic Centre. It was almost deafening. I inhaled slowly and steadily. The air was thick with the sticky warmth of chlorine and the charged crowd. I needed to focus hard. My heart pounded to the tips of my fingers. It takes 1.6 seconds between leaving the board and hitting the water. The importance of the approaching 1.6 seconds was not lost on me. This was it, the Olympic final and the moment I had dreamed of and worked for my whole life. The whistle blew and an eerie silence settled. All I could hear was the gentle and rhythmic gurgle and swoosh of water as it flowed in the drains. I was about to launch into my first dive of 6, the twister. Before the Olympic Games, this was my safest dive and one I knew I could perform well. It was one of my harder dives, but executed correctly, the rewards were high. But in the run-up to the Games, small things had started to go wrong. There were times that I had leant a little bit too far back and landed awkwardly on my side or shoulder, or when I got lost in the dive and would be flailing around through the air without knowing which way was up and which way was down. One day, I landed gracefully on my back with an almighty smack, and on another, I wrenched my neck. My confidence had been slowly chipped away. The possibilities of what could go wrong lurked like shadows in the back of my mind. In my dives, I have to be hyper-vigilant and spot the water. I need to see everything in order to count the rotations so I know where my body is in the air. I'm not just spinning in one direction. There are lots of movements going on at once, and I need to keep every part of my body at the right place at the right millisecond, like an innate internal compass. This is not an opportunity to think about anything else but precisely what I am doing in that instant. At that moment, my focus has to be razor sharp. There is no space to blink or even breathe. So what we've got to do here is, the writer described the moments before his dive. How does the writer try to interest and engage the reader? I can't stress enough the importance of those two words in this question. As you can see on the mark scheme over here, each one mentions its explanation of the text and how language is structured is used to interest and engage readers. You should include the writer's use of language, the writer's use of structure, and the effect on the reader. Now, what's really important to note is that candidates who only consider language or structure cannot go beyond level 2. So if you only mention language, you can't get more than 4 out of 10 marks. If you only mention structure, you can't get more out of 10 marks. So quick recap of structure. I encourage my class to use this acronym CUPS, CUPPSZ. Okay, it's not an exhaustive list, but it really covers the basics. So number 1 is character. So when and how are they established? That's what you want to be asking yourself as you read through. Second one is the use of time. Are there flashbacks? Are there flash forwards? And how do these impact the text? Do they let us know about the consequences of the decisions made, or do they let us know about the motivations? Or if there's no flashbacks or flash forwards, then the text moves in a linear chronology. That just means in a straight line. Okay, so this would be 9 a.m., that would be 5 p.m., and the story moves in a straight line that way. Place, exactly the same as character. When and how is this established? Perspective, you've got 2 main perspectives in fiction, very unlikely to be second person, so I would just focus on these 2. What are the effects of first person? Generally, first person brings the reader closer to the action because we see it through the lens of the characters. Third person, it's slightly removed from the action, but it is more reliable because it is objective. Sentences. This is a nice, easy one to do. You can all spot shorter sentences or long sentences. That's really easy, but consider the effect. So often short sentences can speed things up, but they can also slow things down. So it really depends on how it's used in the text. Long sentences can also do the same, especially long sentences with no punctuation. They'll speed up a text because it will be like reading the kind of stream of consciousness of a character, or it will be giving lots of detail and imagery about what a certain thing looks like. It can also, long sentences can also slow things down, okay? Because they're long, if there's lots of punctuation in them, okay, it will make us be a bit more careful when reading, and you can kind of consider why that might be according to the text. Finally, zoom in or zoom out. Think about film in this one. If you were putting the text into a film, what would you focus on and why? That's all that means for zoom in, zoom out. So we are going to do a quick answer to number 4. So the writer. So I always come up with a nice simple point. It doesn't have to be too complex. And I always try to borrow the language of the question. I'm going to do my first one on interest. The writer creates interest by showing Tom Daly's nervousness. Okay, now we have to explain why, but we will do that in the analysis. So I've just done a colon there. I inhaled slowly and steadily. Now here we've got both a short sentence, I inhaled slowly and steadily, and we've also got these 2 words end in ly. So they, well, it's very likely that they are adverbs, and they are here. So the use of short sentences slows down the pace of the text. Emphasizing Daly's sense of concentration, and the importance of this moment. Okay, now remember, structure has been covered in this one. I'm also going to add the adverbs, so we know adverbs are language. I'm going to list them slowly and steadily. Also imply carefulness. Reiterating. Dailies. Desire not to. Now try and use the lines provided in the exam. Obviously I've run out here. So I'm going to do my link to reader in a different color over here. As a reader, we feel nervous because sorry, let's cross that out, because we are concerned he may make a mistake. So now, obviously, I'm only going to do one paragraph for you guys. So I'm not going to get to this level because I'm not exploring enough. What you want to try and do is write the next paragraph about what engages us in the text, and try and make a different point. So each paragraph's always a different point. But you can see that I have got, well, I've already ticked this off, okay, because I've used language and I've used structure. And my references are definitely valid. Again, I wouldn't say they're developed here. Remember, this is a 10-mark question, so you should be looking for kind of 3 times petal. And you want to be spending about 15 minutes on question 4. Most important thing really is this. Explanation of how text and language is used to interest and engage the readers. That's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to explain, why is this engaging? Why do these language features, why do these structural features make us want to read on? That's essentially what you're answering here. Question 5, this is the first comparison question. It's worth only 6 marks. Again, I would be spending about 10 minutes here. I think what a lot of students tend to do is to spend too long on this question. So I would say come up with your ideas, get your 2 quotes in and move on. You don't really need to explain much. Keyword, write a summary. Okay, so you're not expected to write huge amounts here. You're trying to just give 3 ways in which their experiences are similar. Okay, sometimes this changes. It might be different in the exam. But support each separate similarity with evidence from both texts. So for instance, you're going to make 1 point, you're going to have 2 quotes to support that point. So both texts show people overcoming their fears. Now, I've read both texts already. So I'm just going to kind of go through my examples. Text 1 says, So jump. I heard my voice say. And text 2, there's there were possibilities sorry, there's the possibilities of what could go wrong lurked like shadows. Okay, resist the temptation to list your language features because you will not be marked for them here. Full stop. Now, you might just want to add a simple kind of explanatory sentence, both texts show people overcoming doubts and fears. Okay, and there you go. As you can see, I've only written 4 lines there. You should be just trying to come up with that point, getting 2 quotes down, and a really simple explanation. As I've said, 6 marks, 10 minutes. Don't waste too much time. You need 3 reasons, okay? You cannot get out of level 1 unless you have 3 reasons. So another one, it might be something like, both texts show people in anxious and nervous situations. Quote from both, sum them up in a simple sentence, and that's 2 done. But even if you get 2 done, you're not going to get out of level 2 unless you have 3 sufficient and mostly distinct selection of similarities. You're marked here on your ability to synthesize evidence. So that's to pick out quotes or explain what is going on in the text in a short and precise manner. Look, precise. Finally, make sure you quote from relevant sections. If you're talking about overcoming your fears and then quoting something about, the setting, you're probably not going to get those marks. Good. So this one is basically PEE times 3. But remember, point and evidence has to be for A and B. Or text 1 and 2, we should say. Finally, question 6. Now, this is a huge chunk of the marks. This is 10% of your whole GCSE. So you cannot afford to miss this question. It's so important in this exam. Compare the writer's ideas and perspectives about preparing for an important moment. You should compare the main ideas, the points of view, the presentation of ideas and views. So you want to be looking for language and structural features in this question. So I'm going to come up with a point first of all. I'm going to do 1. So, and the other thing to look out for is you're not just comparing the 2 texts. You're comparing the approaches of the writers, the ideas and the perspectives. That word there, perspectives, is really important because how we approach something is very different from what we're doing. So, for instance, if you're playing a football match, one person might be, extremely excited. One person might be a bit nervous. They're both playing football matches, but their perspectives around the game is different. So both texts show people approaching in with, should say, differing attitudes. In text 1, the writer considers, in text 2, it doesn't really matter which one you start with as long as you're talking about both. In text 2, the writer considers his movements and approach carefully, : keep every part of my body placed at the right millisecond. Okay, so far I've got point, evidence. Now, the repetition, as you can see, keep every right part of the body in the right place at the right moment. The repetition of right. So I've got my language feature there, suggests careful execution or careful thought and execution is required. Should say are required for the jump. Now, another really important thing is to use those connectives which show similarity to the difference. Obviously, I've written whereas, so I'm trying to emphasize the difference here. Whereas in text 1, the writer, or I should really say the person, individual or character, the person has a more carefree and blasé. Blasé is like throwing caution to the wind, like gung-ho. Blasé attitude to the jump. Again, I'm going to use the same quote I did in the last question. So jump. Okay, you're not going to lose marks for this. Each question is generally marked separately. So an examiner will have 100 papers and they'll do one paper they'll do one question at a time, like 100 question 1s, 100 question 2s. So it's very, very unlikely they're going to remember if you're repeating your ideas. And also we can use anywhere in the text for this question. So we can, as long as we're kind of explaining why we're using these, it's not a problem. Now, I can't see any language features in here. So jump, I heard my voice say. I mean, it could be, I heard my voice say is sensory imagery, but I'm just going to use the short sentence again. signifies a more gung-ho attitude of overcoming a challenge. So essentially what I'm saying here is that they have the same task in front of them. They're both jumping from a height. One of them, though, has to put careful thought and consideration into how he's jumping, whereas the other person is just letting go and doing the jumping. I've got in my language features. Now, this is one paragraph, okay? So you want to be doing 3 times, and it's Peter, Peter. Okay, I'm just going to tick these off here in a different color as we go to show you. So both texts show people approaching a challenge with attitudes, with differing attitudes. So it's just kind of my intro here. Part of my point, it considers, in text 2, the writer considers his movements and approach carefully. So that's my point there. Then I've got the quote, keep every part of my body in the right place at the right millisecond. That's my evidence. The use of the repetition of right. Repetition is my technique. And then I've explained it. Words like suggest always show that you're moving into the analysis. Then one thing I haven't put in here is the discourse marker, okay, the connective. However, similarly, obviously it depends whether you're doing a point of similarity or difference. It doesn't matter. It's only asking you to compare here, so you can do either. Whereas in text 1, the person has a more carefree attitude. So one is approaching it carefully, the other one has a carefree attitude or blasé attitude to the jump. So jump, that's the evidence there. Short sentence is my technique, and then my analysis is that last one there. So you want to be doing this, I'd say at least twice, hopefully 3 times, okay? So you probably get away with 2. I'll show you why. So what you're trying to do at this point is to, I'm just going to get rid of this bit. Now what we're trying to show you is that, one, you need to consider a range of comparisons to get, you know, within a good, well, at least half marks. So I would say this obviously isn't a range because I've only done 1 paragraph. Second, you need to include ideas and perspectives with language and structure. So it's really important that you're listing your language and structural features. Go back to cups if you need to, or you can have a look at the forest, but that should be fairly familiar at this point of the year. The selection of references is appropriate and relevant. Okay, so that's the easy bit, which is choosing the quotes. Just make sure that your point is supported by your quotes. Now, at the top end, varied and comprehensive range of comparisons. So that means you want to be doing some similarities and some differences. You're analyzing the ideas and how language and structure is used across the text. So you're talking about the effects of the similes and the metaphors, or of any other language or structural feature. That is it from me. Thanks a lot. Goodbye, guys.